everybody, my name is Alexis and this is Branches. Welcome. I'm an amateur genealogist where twice a week I discuss everything genealogy. In today's video I will be reading off the last of the interview of Griffin Webb, a World War I veteran, and with his stepson Glenn. And where we left off, they were talking about how families just don't get together anymore. If you haven't watched the other two videos, you should definitely go and do that. Otherwise, this will not make any sense. So if you haven't done that, go do that real quick. Okay, now remember, they were talking about how families don't get together anymore. So Glenn says, so then we're getting down not to today where the teenagers don't want to talk with older people. Griffin says, yeah, that's right. Glenn says, so they are missing out a lot of learning from experience that they don't get in books in school. Griffin says, boys and girls are missing a whole lot. They think they know it all. You're old. You don't know nothing. When you come up, there wasn't anything in this world, and now there's everything. The teenager absolutely figures that the old people are ignorant and they don't realize what's going on. That's right, I've watched them. I've got grandchildren. That's that way. That's right. Glenn asked, have you ever heard it said by young people today, well, we're going to make a new world because you ruined it? Griffin says, yeah, that's right. Glenn says, what have you to say to those kids? Griffin says, well, you take your own colors. Well, heck, what does he know? There wasn't nothing going on when he grew up. He don't know nothing. That's the way they look at it. I've heard them talk. And Glenn says, what have you to say to those kids that say that? Nothing here when you were growing up, but yet you have told us what you have made of your life growing up and to be something. Griffin says, well, you take those teenagers coming up now that talks that way. They're just ignorant to the fact that they can't see back yonder because they are not educated to that part, to that class of living. And the way people lived then and what they had, and there's nobody lived here, so what do you know? You don't know nothing. That's the way they look at it. There's nobody here to learn them anything, teach them anything. Glenn says, in thinking back though, and I've told some of my kids before in school that we've had an awful lot of wonderful Christmases together. But I think when I look back on the happy days of my life, I think it was that 2 years there with you on the farm. Then you were Pop. We had Christmas in the families. All the Webbs came and we slept in the hayloft in the top, but we had one present. Griffin says, yeah, that's right. Glenn says, and kids today have 20 to 25 gifts under the tree. Griffin says, and expect it too. Glenn says, I can remember and I still have the present you and Mama got me when I was 8 years old. Griffin said, you still got it? Glenn says, and that was the only Christmas present I had that day, our beach ball, our balls we played with. I remember it was the bladder of the hogs we killed. Griffin said, yeah, that's right. Oh, God, can you imagine? It's your gift. And they treasured it, obviously. And Glenn says, and we had more fun with that. Getting back to the farm, how do you make molasses? Griffin says, well, you make that from sugar cane. And you got to take that cane and put it in a mill and squeeze that juice out of it and put it in a vat and boil it and take the skimmings that comes off the top. And you can always gauge it by holding it up and looking at it on a skimmer. And when it gets roped down good, you know you got molasses. And if you don't want it to rope down good, well, you got syrup. It's thin, but if you want good thick molasses, you cook it down until it turns black. Then when it gets cold, it will turn to sugar. Glenn says, now what did you use to do? In other words, you cut the cane. How did you squeeze it? Griffin says, squeeze it in a mill. And Glenn says, what did you use to squeeze it with? I mean, the mill. Griffin says, you mean to pull the mill with? Well, we used the horses to pull the mill with. We put a pole up on that mill and it would go round and round and round. And Glenn says, or mean little kids. Griffin says, yeah. Glenn says, now after you got the juice out of the sugar cane, what did you do with that? Griffin says, the shucks was thrown away. Glenn says, you put them in a big pit, didn't you? Griffin says, yeah. And Glenn says, and the skimmings off the syrup, what did you do with that? And Griffin says, well, we'd feed them to the hogs. Glenn says, so in other words, everything was used, either back into the ground, in ourselves, or in the animals. And Griffin says, yeah, that's right. Glenn says, so there was nothing wasted. And Griffin says, nope, nothing was wasted. Glenn says, I can remember another time I got a real good spanking. You used to make some good wine. Griffin said, yeah. Glenn says, what did you make that out of? Griffin says, well, we make it out of scuppernongs or blackberries. You put it in a barrel and bested it all up and poured some sugar on it and let it work off and strain it off and on. And you got something that will knock the hat off your head. Glenn says, unless you got two mean little kids that will go up and uncork it. Griffin says, yeah. And Glenn says, well, Pop, thanks for letting us in on some of your life stories. So that is the end of the interview with Griffin Webb. So now that we're at the end of the interview with Griffin Webb and Glenn, his stepson, I'd like to talk a little bit about Griffin Webb myself. He was my great-grandfather, and he passed away when I was about 4 years old, but I remember him as clear as a bell to this day. And I just remember he was a lot older and he was very frail, you know, because like I said, I was only 4 years old when he passed away. It was towards the end of his life. And he was a great man. And my mama, my grandma, his daughter, used to tell me stories about him all the time. And one of the things I remember is kind of funny, but he would always give us kids circus peanuts when we go to visit him. And if you don't know what circus peanuts are, they're a candy that are orange, basically just like pure sugar. He kept those all the time. And they look like peanuts. They're shaped like peanuts, and they got like a little design on them to make them look like peanuts. But anyway, so, and to this day, occasionally I'll have to go to the store and get me some circus peanuts because it helps me to remember him. All right, well, there you have it. That is the end of this 3-part series of an interview with Griffin Webb, a World War I veteran. I hope you've enjoyed this series. And like I said, if you haven't watched the other 2 videos, go ahead and go like those and go watch them. And don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up while you're here. See you guys later.